She sat in, you sat in the front in church. I mean, if you can sit in front in church, you can sit in front anywhere. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the folks in the room. I reckon we'll have people trickling in. It's two things conspiring. Now, you poor folks, we're back. It snowed us out the last time, and that's why Casey and Luis are back today. And now we have spring break, which might be a bigger natural disaster for some people as far as like just leaving town. About half our staff is gone with their kids. But anyway, welcome to the people who are watching us online as well. I'm really pleased to welcome Casey Bryant and Luis Adolfo Bermudez from Advocates for Immigrant Rights. Casey founded that organization in 2018, I think. I loved this little sentence in your bio. I founded it to be an organization that values the dignity of all people disenfranchised by the immigration system in this country. The dignity of all people is something that shows up in the Episcopal Church's baptismal promises. It's something that's really core to who we are, to say how do we value the dignity of all people. Luis Adolfo Bermudez has been certified by the DOJ to practice affirmative immigration law. Maybe we'll hear more about exactly what that entails or what that helping people navigate these Byzantine systems. But I wanted to give you a statement that our presiding bishop, Sean Rao, and Julia Ayala Harris, the president of the House of Deputies for the Episcopal Church, made a few months ago, maybe a month ago. So that because Scripture teaches that because our true citizenship is not here on earth but in heaven, we are called to transcend the earthly distinctions made among us by the leaders of this world. This sacred call shapes both our church-wide commitment to stand with migrants and the ministries of congregations across our church who serve vulnerable immigrants and refugees in their communities. Whatever your faith tradition or none, Christians and Jews, the place of the stranger and the migrant and the immigrant is absolutely core. It starts at the beginning, and the people that we've received our scriptures from wandered into other places and depended upon the hospitality of other people. So in some ways, this is, it's an issue that's a political issue, but it's an issue that's ancient for our faith tradition. And so we're really grateful for the work you're doing in the world, and come tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try not to act awkward with this microphone here. Yeah, certainly immigration has been a really hot button political issue, especially now, but it has been, I think, for a long time. But the fact is that the people who are here in this country are protected by the United States Constitution, whether or not they are citizens or non-citizens. So the work that we do, we like to say it's not about politics, it's about people, and people deserve dignity. So my name is Casey Bryant. I'm the Executive Director for Advocates for Immigrant Rights. I am an attorney. I've practiced immigration law. I still practice immigration law. I've been doing it for more than 10 years. And before that, I was really rooted in legal services. So I've always been a nonprofit attorney. And I started Advocates for Immigrant Rights in October of 2010. It was really the height of the first Trump administration. And so before establishing AIR, that's what we call it, Advocates for Immigrant Rights, I worked at another organization doing immigration law. And so we, in coalition with other organizations here in Memphis. So we responded really in force to the first Trump administration by doing presentations and trainings for the community that was really freaked out about what was about to happen. So, I mean, Obama had a good 8-year run, and then we had Trump, and everybody was on edge about what was going to happen to immigrant people. So I could see, even before I started AIR, that there was a great need in the community for reliable, accessible, efficient, and effective legal services for immigrant people. So Memphis has an immigration court that has jurisdiction over all people who live in Tennessee, Arkansas, North Mississippi, and sometimes Kentucky. So it is a very broad swath of the region. And there are only just a few nonprofit immigration programs. And there's actually only just a few private attorneys who do immigration law. And they're mostly centered in Memphis. They're peppered across Tennessee, and there's some more in Northwest Arkansas and maybe Little Rock, but that's it. It's a handful only. So there was a great need. Lost my train of thought. So I started Advocates for Immigrant Rights. It was just me and one other person. I felt like it was a responsibility that I had as someone who had some skill and experience in doing immigration law, and I've always been interested in working directly with populations of people who are different than me. So I didn't start out doing law. I was studying in graduate school Asian theater. Just because I'm so interested in other cultures, and I really love the way that there is an overlap in people, no matter where they're from or what their culture is. So we all have some very baseline fundamental similarities, and I love to see that no matter where I go. I shifted gears and I did immigration law, and so that's how I ended up where I am now. The organization is set up so that we can pivot wherever we need to address issues that are coming up and that are where people need representation. So we have three main programs. One of them is Mid-South Unity program, Mid-South Family Unity. This is really, the program is to make sure families who are living here get to stay together. There's another called the Freedom Found Initiative, which is for people who are newly arriving in this country to be able to stay in the United States and be free to be who they are. And then we have a focus on LGBTQ clients. So this could be any type of application, but for people who are specifically LGBTQ. And that's because that's a more vulnerable subset of people, so they have kind of multiple overlaying vulnerabilities, being undocumented, being LGBTQ, and having those multiple layers makes it so that they have a little additional support that they require in their immigration case. We also, in 2021, when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, we were able to take on or create a new program to represent Afghan nationals who came to the United States, and specifically Memphis and Nashville area. So we took on like 50 or 60 individuals from Afghanistan and represented them in their asylum cases. And then most recently, we have started our unaccompanied children program. So we contracted with the federal government to be able to represent 200 unaccompanied children last year for free in their immigration cases. And so in that program, we represent them on a universal representation model, meaning that no matter what it is that we're doing for them, we're going to do their case for free as long as it takes. And so we've had the opportunity to get funding through this contract. And I don't know if you heard that recently, part of all the changes that are going on, one among them was trying to cancel that contract. And so we're not the only organization in Memphis that has similar programming, and actually we're part of a network of organizations across the whole country that represent children in this capacity. And so when the federal government said that they were going to they sent us a stop work order in the middle of February saying, don't do any more work on this contract. We're considering whether or not we want to cancel it. Now this contract for us is almost $1 million a year. So it was a very significant boon for our organization and really for the community to be able to take on new representation for kids under the program. And so when we got the stop work order, that meant that basically there's a possibility that our funding could just be cut. So we knew this was coming. We didn't know when or how, and we've seen a whole bunch of changes that we'll talk about a little later, but it's really kicked us into high gear for figuring out how we can maintain a sustainable program over the years to have not just provide dignity for our clients, but also for the people who work for our organization. We're a nonprofit, and nonprofit legal programs struggle to just pay attorneys a reasonable amount to be able to do the work that they need to do. And so we are committed to really seeing our program through the next this presidential term and beyond, so that we can continue to build capacity and represent our clients to the fullest. So I'm going to turn it over to Luis, who is our Development and Communications Manager, and let him talk for a minute, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Casey, and thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time on this Sunday morning to care for this topic that brings us today. I wanted to begin by sharing my favorite quote that talks about immigration, and it's a quote said by Ban Ki-moon. He was a former UN Secretary General, and he said, "Migration is an expression of the human aspiration for dignity, safety, and hope for a better future." And I thought that encompasses what really immigration is, you know, in spite of the rabbit holes that we may all get into, like who deserves to be here, or all this language that we hear. In essence, and I like that we're circling around the word dignity, because in the end, that's what human beings we want to strive for, right? The life of dignity, safety, and hope for a better future. And at one point in each one of our lineage or family members, at one point, however many generations before us, somebody said, "I gotta get out of here. This is not working anymore, I'm not safe," whether it be through coercion or you know, any situation that takes a human being to pick up their few belongings and say, "I gotta get out of here," is worthy of our empathy and our sympathy. So with that, I became an immigrant. I'm originally from Nicaragua, and at 4 or 5 years old, my family was the one that said, my parents said, "We gotta get out of Nicaragua." At that moment in 1982, the country was immersed in a Marxist-Leninist revolution that had to topple the previous dictatorship to establish a new dictatorship, and it was time to go. So from a very young age, I realized the word immigrant can be, even within Central America. We didn't even come to the United States. We came from Nicaragua, we moved to Guatemala, then to Honduras, and then finally to El Salvador, where most of my life I lived until 2013, when I became an immigrant again and moved to the United States through a family-based petition. But at that moment, I had no idea how hard it was, the plight for the immigrant moving to the United States. It was a pure fluke of destiny that I ended up working for a nonprofit in immigration, Community Legal Center, and there I discovered the Department of Justice Accredited Representative Program. Like, I had no idea. It turns out that the Department of Justice accredits non-attorneys. Sure, we have to show that we know immigration law. We have to, you know, it's not as easy as, you have to work for a recognized agency, which AIR is, and at the time, and still CLC is as well. All of our nonprofits, the nonprofits that host this program need to be recognized. That's step number one. So step number two is when individuals present their applications, we have to, you know, have hours of observation and attorney supervising our work and all of this requisites. But then I got my accreditation. So I've been doing that since 2015. So 11 years now, hundreds of cases I've seen. And what a position to get to know the story of, otherwise we would only hear on, you know, a report or chats like this, but to get firsthand and see the struggle, and it really, I wish I could just have the power to just say to everybody, you know, this is the story of everybody, and then probably we wouldn't be stuck in this. But since there's attorney-client privileges and all of this, you know, the stories are not so open. But once I got to see it and realize the hardships, it completely changed my mind about before, and this is the irony of it all, that even when I was living in Central America, we were in our little bubbles, you know, working every day. We don't know what's happening. So I had no idea. I would only hear people, oh, decide to leave. The gangs, you know, all of these. But again, the bubbles that society it just had me away from everything. It was so ironic for me to see that it wasn't until I came to the United States that I started to really see the stories that were moving many people coming out. So in that capacity, now I've transferred that knowledge to development, where really I see a situation where, at the end of the day, this is the bottom line. Government has a lot of attorneys, an army of attorneys, as I like to say, well paid, ready to process cases and remove people. And in this aspect, this is our role that we're playing, is that we are one of those few, as Casey said, and nonprofits also that provide access for a very complex legal system. And cases like how I got to see a pastor that was an American living abroad, and all of a sudden the cartel there in Monterrey started to target him and his family, and all of a sudden he had no idea how the immigration, he's an American, but has been living in Mexico for years and years, and all of a sudden he's targeted and needs to get back with his family and adopted children, and all of a sudden finds how hard it is and how expensive it is to get family-based representation of something that, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's certainly doable when the conditions are met. But if you don't have an attorney, dead in the water, most likely these cases. And that's the changes we're seeing now, where the bolts are tightening, even through the legal pathways that already exist, which are very few. This is how administratively also the administration is closing the few door pathways that are, so making it extra hard and extra careful for us, because these little changes that happen, for instance, now if a case gets rejected, it goes into removal proceedings, whereas before it wasn't, the person just got a case denied, but it wasn't referred to an immigration proceeding, where now they have a problem, you know, where before, as they were just seeking for a relief, but if it's denied, so that makes an extra onus on organizations like us. So thank you for caring for this. We wanted to share what we do and invite you to come visit our website. We were trying to build a community with supporters, with people that care about immigration, where we can foster this relationship with our client base that really stay tuned. That's why we want to follow us on social media. We are present on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky X, all of it. And we're pushing information there. And soon, the last thing I'll say is, I've mentioned it with a few supporters, but we're trying to get, again, the community to come and talk and get in meetings like this. So we want to launch. This is a little bit of a sneak preview because it's not up there yet. It's in the works, but soon we want to have it. It's going to be called Roots by Routes Coffee Club. So why the name Roots by Routes? Because we all have roots in here in Memphis and came from different routes. So the idea is to have coffee with members of our team, maybe even with former clients, success stories, where we can have a cup of coffee and talk about immigration, all things immigration related matters. Listen to stories, listen to even like our donors have a story of immigration. So we think that this is going to be a great way to foster a relationship and in a way where we're included in this work. So thank you so much for this moment. And airlegal.org is where we can.
So there are there's about 35,000 undocumented people in Tennessee. And this presidential administration has vowed to just get rid of all of the undocumented people in the whole country. I think you had a sermon maybe last week where you talked the homily. Is it called a homily? Sermon. Discussed the people who created all of this new space that were maybe from another country. There is a huge economic benefit that we receive from the people who are willing to do work, hard work, skilled work from other countries who are here. And so it would be, I don't like to talk about people in terms of economics, but I think that there are a lot of ways that this administration has closed their eyes to the benefits that our communities receive by having a diverse population of people. And I just wrote down some numbers because sometimes people like them. 65,000 U.S. citizen children are living with an undocumented parent. And so if undocumented people are just taken out of this state, there's going to be 65,000 children with no parents. And the enforcement mechanisms that this administration is putting into play right now are aggressive, they are swift, they remove the possibility for people to really have an opportunity to fight their case with the court. Immigration law is very complicated. If I start talking about it, I'll totally lose all of you. But it's so complicated and requires representation. So representation is, legal representation in immigration court is a right of all immigrant people, but it's not a foregone conclusion because it's not provided. So many people don't understand. In a criminal context, we have public defenders that are appointed to people who can't afford an attorney. But in immigration court, that is not the case. So a child who maybe is here without their parents, regardless of age, would be required to represent themselves if they couldn't get an attorney. So a 2-year-old could go to court and the judge would have to address them as if they were understanding of what was going on in that court case. So immigration law is very complicated. This context is very aggressive right now, and there's a lot to lose for people who suffer the consequences. Many people have come from places where they are in danger of returning. There's lots of reasons why people come. There's lots of reasons why people stay. But the fact that they're here means that they should have the right to argue their case and have legal representation. So we provide that legal representation, and we do charge fees to our clients. We do fees, it's a sliding scale fee base, based on what a household's ability to pay is. So we look at the size of the household, we look at income, but we also look at how long someone's been in the United States and whether they have work authorization, what kind of work they can get or could get. And so we do a lot of work for free. We charge people, $1,000 over the course of 3 years or something. So we have these extended payment plans. But that doesn't pay for all of our services, and that's why we got that federal contract so that we could increase our capacity and not have to charge children. That's why we apply for grants and we ask for donations. This work is important. This work is essential, and more it's it's something that is there's going to be more of it as this presidency progresses. So, like Louise said, we're very glad to be able to come today. I want to open it up to questions, but we want you all to help us advocate in whatever way you can. And so sharing information about what's going on to your friends and neighbors. So many people have misconceptions about why people are here, what people are trying to do, whether they're criminals or not criminals. And I think that, bringing compassion and light to our neighbors' situations is one of the best ways that we can advocate for the people who are in this country who deserve just as much as we do. Yeah. Do you guys have questions? Do we have time for questions?
We've got plenty of time.
Okay.
Yeah, this is great. And thank you. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louise, for...
First of all, thank you both for the work you're doing. 2 questions. The first is, do we have any idea where all of the children are who were separated from their families the first time this president was in office? Second question is, has it always been as complicated for someone to get documentation, or is it just a result of, again, Trump's first administration?
Those are 2 great questions. I think the first question about separation of families, there's been a lot of litigation and a lot of work done over the course of the 4 years after Trump left office. And so I think a lot of that has sorted out. That was an example of the executive branch using processes that were already sort of in place to do harm to immigrant peoples, specifically so that they would, as a deterrent for people coming to the United States. And so I say that to say that a lot of right now, the enforcement mechanisms have already been on the books. They were on the books before the Trump administration. The last big immigration reform was in 1996 under Bill Clinton, and that really changed changed immigration law to add in this element of criminality and kind of fusing the criminal justice system with the immigration system in a way that was facilitated people being removed from the United States. So most of the laws that are on the books now have been on the books for a long time. Each administration that comes in has discretion to enforce the laws in different ways. Immigration law is administrative, and so it's enshrined in statute, and then it goes down through the Federal Code of Regulations, and then is sort of practiced based on guidelines that have to do with what is the mood of the administration at the time. So each administration kind of has a different take on it. And so I think under the first Trump administration, the people, the hive mind or whatever of the government was trying to figure out ways to pull the strings and use the laws in a certain way. And a little bit of that was undermined by COVID because everything slowed down and kind of got put on ice. Sorry. But I think they used those lessons to really figure out how to manipulate what was on the books now to do their best, to do their worst. And so I think what I see in the future with the Congress and the Senate both being supermajority conservative, there are going to be some new laws that are going to be even more aggressive towards immigrant people. So right now they're using what's already there, but it could be different.
Thanks for coming to Calvary. Just two sort of quick questions. But the first is, the Supreme Court provided some relief for the foreign aid folks on their funding, and I don't know if that applies to you or not. And then secondly, is it the stated objective of the government to remove all undocumented peoples in the United States? Is that the stated goal, or is it something less than that?
Well, that was certainly a campaign promise for the Trump administration. It's not a formal government stated goal. I mean, there's a whole legal process for removal of a person who has been adjudicated to not be admissible into the United States, but that's not the same as a carte blanche initiative to remove all people who are undocumented. The Supreme Court or the USAID funds don't have anything to do with our work. Specifically, the funding that we've had access to is through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is under the Department of Health and Human Services, I think. And so refugee resettlement is something that we've been engaged in for a long time. Refugees are adjudicated to have a fear of persecution if they were returned to their country, but they are adjudicated before they enter the United States. So a refugee enters with status already. Mostly we don't do direct work with the refugee program, but we do work with asylees. And so an asylee is someone who's adjudicated after they've arrived in the United States as being afraid of persecution in their country. So they have to prove the same things, but they prove them in a different place. And so our work isn't directly funded by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, except for the Unaccompanied Children Program, and that's through a different section of the Immigration and Immigration and Nationality Act. Yes.
You may have partially answered my question, but there's some groups of people who were granted temporary protective status even for many, many years. Are you working with that population, or do you foresee, do they have different rights than undocumented people? And
Well, temporary protected status was something that was created as sort of a Band-Aid for in lieu of actually granting status to people who were from Central America.
Haiti.
Well, I mean, even before that, when TPS started. So TPS has never been a permanent solution to anybody coming into the United States. Temporary protected status is granted to people from certain countries where the U.S. government has determined that it's not safe for them to return for some reason. So, for instance, there were a lot of people from Central America who came after Hurricane Mitch back in the 80s. And that was, I think, that was one of the first times that TPS was created. So it was like because the governments in Central America didn't have the infrastructure to accept people coming back who had fled. And so we granted them temporary protected status. Some of that status has been extended over the years, but it wasn't ever a permanent relief. And so we do have many clients who have TPS. And so they've extended TPS to different countries over the course of time. Haiti, Venezuela had TPS that was recently rescinded. Cameroon, people from Cameroon have TPS because there's a civil war raging in Cameroon. I think Sudan has, people from Sudan can get TPS. So there's different designations at different times. But it is something that's always at the discretion of the executive branch. And it doesn't confer any legal status. It just kind of makes someone in more of a liminal space where they aren't subject to being removed from the country or put into immigration proceedings. They get work authorization, but they don't have a formal permanent status in the United States.
Thank you all. Oh my God. Thank you for being here this morning. My dad was a political refugee to the U.S. in the 70s, so deep gratitude for the work of folks like you and supporting my family and so many others. I have a twofold question as well. One is that I haven't had the chance to dig into it, but I understand that something passed in the Tennessee legislature that's preventing undocumented children from going to public schools. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. And then my second question is, from your vantage point, given this political landscape, are there things that you all would recommend or suggest that everyday citizens can do to exert political pressure on our representatives, kind of given also who we have perhaps in the Senate and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't think that law is passed yet. It just went through committee, I think. But the Tennessee General Assembly is about to vote on a bill that will make it so that individual school systems can require students to prove that they have lawful status in the United States. And if a child doesn't have lawful status, then they would have to pay a fee to go to public school. And it flies directly in the face of a U.S. Supreme Court precedent, Plyler v. Doe, that says that all children should be able to go to public school regardless of their immigration status. So this is Tennessee's effort to directly challenge federal established law. And this is really exemplary of what the Tennessee General Assembly is working on. To try to make Tennessee a very hostile place for immigrant people. So there's another bill that I'm not totally up to date on everything that's going on, but there was a bill that was proposed to have people who are non-citizens have a mark on their driver's license to indicate that they are not citizens. And so this was supposedly to make it so that there was elimination of voter fraud with the idea that people who aren't eligible to vote are voting, which isn't really, I don't believe that it's an issue in Tennessee at all. And there's other bills that would make it so that, like a nonprofit organization that helps undocumented people figure out how to stay in the United States might be considered human traffickers. So, this has a potential consequence of making our job a little tough. There are, I'm trying to think of some other bills that have, they're all pretty bad. And the second part of your, everyday people. So there was another one that was about incentivizing local municipalities and jurisdictions to engage with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement through formal memorandum of agreement with this program called 287G. So basically this would deputize local police officers and sheriff's departments to enforce immigration law. That means that local law enforcement would have about 4 weeks training on immigration law and what it means. And then they would go out and find undocumented people for ICE. And so this is a program that is actually very dangerous because empowering people who don't really understand what's going on, and this is like a super complicated area, and putting them into proceedings in a way that it eliminates their right to argue their case, is dangerous and also costly for local municipalities. So this is a bill that's also at play right now, and each municipality would have the option to engage with ICE, and so I think that as people at large calling the sheriff's office or calling the mayor. And insisting that this isn't a place that will countenance an agreement like that is important. In Shelby County, the mayor has indicated that he doesn't have any interest in engaging with ICE. Well, that was the city of Memphis. Shelby County, I'm not totally sure, but I don't think they are either. But Hamilton County has applied for that agreement, so that's Chattanooga. And Putnam County has applied for that agreement. Already Knox County and Greene County, they were engaged with ICE for years in the past. But this is something that, we know those people. We know our mayor. We know we can have access to those people. In addition to that, calling our representatives and in the state government as well as the federal government is something that, even if it feels like it might not work, they have to hear our voices. They have to know that they don't speak for us. And something that I've been hearing about is local people calling for town halls with their House representatives and senators. I'd like to see Marsha Blackburn come here and explain to us why she's doing the things that she's doing. Or even Steve Cohen. Like, I haven't heard him speak out about what's going on, and he should. And he lives right down the road. So why isn't he having a town hall? And at least this is an opportunity for, members of the community to sit in front of our lawmakers and quiz them on what they're doing to lift our voices up. So those are two really big ones. Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks from me as well. Is local deportation activity all stealth, or is there a way to really know what is happening?
Yes.
Yes, to the first part?
It's not, so there's a group in town called Vecindarios 901. That means neighbors 901. And they are volunteer people like any of y'all who are receiving tips through a hotline that's like, I think we saw ICE activity on Macon and whatever. And then there are confirmers that drive out just to see, take pictures, find out what's going on. So from what I understand, ICE is doing stakeouts. They'll stake out a place for a couple of days to, I don't know what they're looking for, and then the pattern is that then they'll go and do some arrests. And so they're doing targeted arrests, but they're also arresting anyone in their net that kind of gets in the way. And so we're not seeing raids as much. I think that's kind of language that people are hearing about, but it's more like just like they're here and then they're there and then they're there, and they've got a convoy of vehicles, and they go and they wait for someone to get in their car to go to work, and then they go up to them, and if someone else is in the car, then they get questioned and they get taken in, and it all happens really fast, and there's not it's sort of like disappearing people is what it is.
And we did have a training on that here at Calvary in about 2019. I did it, I did interpret Israel, but we can have another training, and we have a lot more people on the text now than we did in the first year.
Yeah, and this is a way to do some direct action. I mean, you're not confronting ICE or just take photos and report back. Yeah. So like people are snapping photos of the license plate and pictures of the people from ICE, or identifying that this is maybe an ICE officer, but this is an MPD officer, and this is one from the Sheriff's Department, and they said that they're not really participating, but why are they here? Or this is the Homeland Security investigation. So there's different agents that are involved, but all of this is good to know. All of this is important information to be informed about, so that we really know what's going on. I mean, these are our neighbors. These are people that work with us and work for us, and they're not just. This isn't just a small community of people who are affected, and like, well, I could just go on with my life. This is something that's happening in our area. I mean, people are being policed, and it's not.
Two
not
quick
right.
questions.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, 55,000 children who are Americans, but their parents are undocumented.
65.
So let's go there first.
Yeah.
And do you have the documents available to you, like a standard form that they can fill out to grant guardianship should they be scooped up in an ICE raid? Who's going to take care of their children, and also one for who is going to handle their finances to see that the bills are paid? That's the first question. And making those available to people, anybody, not a client. And then the second question is, are you educating businesses on their rights? Because ICE can show up at your door. Now, if you're a restaurant, they can walk right in, but unless they order food, you can throw them out. And they can't go poking around your kitchen without that warrant.
Right. That's right.
So are you educating businesses? They can come to church, but if they didn't come to worship, they can be asked to leave, and they can't see human resources files without a very specific warrant.
That's right. That is
Judges'
right.
So are you educating about that, what our rights are?
Yeah. The powers of attorney is what are the documents that would indicate who should handle assets or children should someone be removed or detained.
They should do that before.
Yeah, they
ever
should
get
do that
removed
before.
and talk
Yes,
to their children.
absolutely.
These are going to be taken care
Yeah,
of.
you are certainly informed. So we're advising members of the community to be prepared, to consider the possibility of what could happen, to understand what their status is and how they may be affected by enforcement activities. And so part of that preparation is executing powers of attorney to determine what other trusted individual might care for their belongings or their children. Another one is really making sure that they have money saved in case they need to pay for an attorney, or in case that someone gets deported and the rest of the family is going to go back to Mexico with them. And so we're working hard with our clients to provide that information. It is a huge lift to try to go do trainings for all employers or all schools or all churches. So we're trying to work with other organizations that are more available to do that kind of community outreach, but we're definitely advising and sharing resources about that. So, I mean, specifically, the warrant is something that we understand in the criminal context as a absolute requirement for searching and arresting someone, and this requirement is constitutional. And so for immigration purposes, immigration officers often don't bother going to the federal court to get a warrant for arrest or search. They just lean on what's called an administrative warrant, which is basically just a document that says they're looking for a particular person. And that warrant doesn't give the same kind of constitutional authority to do a search and seizure. And so this warrant is something that's protects any private area from unlawful search
Or
and seizure.
business area.
Yeah,
They
yeah. Well,
still have
I mean,
to
the business area. There's also, you can distinguish a private section of that, and so. But the trainings are something that we don't really have the capacity to do because we're trying to provide the direct representation. Oh, maybe they can disseminate that information. That's a good idea. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe.
Maybe. Uh-oh.
Two practical questions. One is, what is the name of your website?
It's airlegal.org. So AIR is Advocates for Immigrant Rights, legal, airlegal.org.
Second practical question. On your website, do you have a PDF that we could print out and give to people we know that are undocumented?
We don't have it on our website just yet. Actually, yesterday we were talking about really needing to update it. But there are oodles of materials, and I'd be happy to put together a compendium to share with y'all. And also, actually, the Episcopal Church has a very comprehensive website with a lot of information on it. If you just Google Immigration Episcopal, it'll pop up with like the direct page with a lot of information on it. Yes.
I actually,
Yes.
and Bill, I actually have the family taking care of our daughter when she's away from us in the Hudson Valley is Honduran. And Kate sent us some cards, some very small cards that you can laminate that just to give to somebody in English and Spanish, just that these are my rights, so that people know about search and seizure. It's very small, very simple. We're going to close. Yeah. Go.
And I can just, I hate to get,
You
okay,
have to.
sorry, but people are talking about action and that bill that's in the, being considered in the Tennessee House right now about requiring school children who are undocumented to pay for their education. Tennessee Education for All, right now there's a big push to have people get in touch with, in fact, our Shelby County representative is head of the Education Commission for the state, and the Senate just barely passed this bill, and on Tuesday morning it's going to be considered for in the House of Representatives. And there's a huge push to Tennessee Education for All. If you look online, they're hoping that tomorrow people will get involved in the phone bank and call our Shelby County representative and put pressure to not pass this.
I did that last week on Thursday. We called the Senate, the people on that committee, we called their constituents and had them call. And they changed the vote. We had one vote, but 4 voted against it. So it went from 1 to 4. So tomorrow they're going to be calling all day phone making. And I have the link. You can get on and get trained and make calls at your own time.
Thank you all. We're gonna close this off. We can still keep talking after. Just to say, we don't wade into the issue of the day here, and I think you've made clear that this isn't an issue that one party's gotten right all the time and one party's gotten. It's not a partisan thing, but I do again contend that the migrant goes so deep in the Christian and the Jewish story that there's a special kind of attention we have to pay to these issues that sometimes makes its way into the granular conversations we're having now about what would loving the stranger look like in this particular context. So I appreciate y'all giving us some resources to do that. And just to return to that question of dignity that we started with in our baptismal covenant, we say that we promise to respect the dignity of every human being. I hope there's a way we can also just speak differently.
Yeah.
I think some of the policies have been the same for a long time, and we just speak differently. And as a preacher, I think our words matter. So maybe one of the small things you and I can do is just think about the way, whatever you think on a particular issue or a particular piece of legislation, how do we just commit to speak differently, speak generously? I really appreciate, Luis, here talking about the experience of a migrant and how they'd humanize this. What would it take for me to pick up all of my things and leave Memphis and go to another country where I don't speak the, So anyway, thank you for your work. Thank you for bringing this important information to us, and we'll continue the conversations, and hopefully Calvary can be a place where a handful of Christians can do what we can to love all of God's people in the ways we can.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
Appreciate you.